Coming up on today's edition of Red's Reality Podcast, I'm going to talk to you about Tyler Stephensn and whether or not we should be worried coming out of spring training game from yesterday. I'm going to talk to you about Luis Robert Jr. and something that popped into my head about why I think the Reds could still go and get him and why I think that would be a good move and a good thing for the Reds if they were able to accomplish that. And finally, even though due to circumstances beyond my control, I was not able to get this episode out yesterday, I still want to talk about the hit king Peter Edward Rose, even though we're now 13 days away from opening day instead of 14, because there is relevant news surrounding our beloved hit king. All of that's coming up right now. Tyler Stephensn, Steve-O, was pulled from the spring training game yesterday with back stiffness. The original word from Tito, Terry Francona, was that it was nothing more than simple fatigue, which is natural to happen over the course of spring training. However, it came out early this morning that Steve-O is going to get an MRI just to make certain of those original findings. So all we can do is hope beyond hope that that is indeed the case, because we all know, as much as we love Jose Trevino, the Reds' death at catcher goes Austin Wins and a couple of others. Will Battenfield, who I mentioned earlier on from his offensive standpoint in spring training, but there are major holes in his game as a catcher. The catching death just is not there because, of course, the biggest prospect, Alfredo Duno, is 19 years old and years away from the major leagues. So if we lose Tyler, that's a bad thing on multiple fronts, because not only are we missing him and his presence in the lineup as an everyday player and the stability he brings there, but we're also missing who else to replace him with. And probably we'll have to go outside of the organization if a move needs to be made. So let's hope that doesn't happen. Sorry about that little pause there. I had some trouble finding my scene transition button for a second there. Anyway, over on Locked On Red yesterday, my friends Stephen Offenbaker and Jeff Carr were talking about the Reds outfield and how great of an addition Austin Hayes has been to that outfield. As I've discussed here on my show as well, we are getting 2023 Austin Hayes, which is exactly what we wanted, but that spurred something in me, and I started thinking about how much stronger not just the Reds outfield, but any outfield in general, but of course we're talking about our team here today. But any outfield in general is far more strong with two solid everyday outfielders and not two of the three outfield positions in a platoon scenario. The Reds, of course, already have that in right field with Jake Fraley and Stuart Fairchild, and it's pretty much the norm to have at least one of the three outfield positions in a platoon now. It pretty much is impossible to have all three outfielders as an everyday position player. However, Luis Robert Jr. is still out there from what we know. The White Sox are still very much in the ultimate rebuild mode as the worst team in baseball. So why would they not be still looking to get rid of their best asset? And I started thinking about this and the potential of this. If the Reds were able to grab Luis Robert Jr., what that would do is have Austin Hayes in left field, Luis Robert Jr. in center field, and move TJ Friedl to right field. At that point, you wouldn't have any platoon, and you would have three bona fide outfielders and essentially two leadoff hitters as well, because TJ Friedl would likely slide down to the number 9 position, creating the double leadoff scenario that's now available with DH in both leagues, with Robert staying in the leadoff position. Now, there are, of course, two big problems with this, and that the Reds tried to do this once, and the White Sox asking price was way too high. It varies from report to report, but one report saw a trade scenario as severe as Edwin Arroyo, Chase Burns, and Rhett Lauder for Luis Robert Jr. Obviously, the Reds aren't going to do that, and no team would pay a price that high. However, we are now 13 days away from opening day. Spring training is almost over, which means you cannot make a move again until the trade deadline in the regular season. At least that's usually the case, that we don't see moves made until that point, just before the All-Star break and just after the All-Star break in July. So I started thinking about, would the White Sox, instead of keeping Luis Robert Jr. for half a season, just want him to feel more solid about where he is and get pieces that go along with their rebound scenarios? Would that indeed be the case? And sorry if you saw a little movement there from me. I'm trying to do this in one take today to get this up for you all rather quickly, because some of this news is going to get old really fast due to my issues yesterday, and I received a text notification on my Mac. So it caused me to be a little bit startled there. But as I was saying, would the White Sox pursue just having pieces that they know go toward their future? Is it a possibility that Luis Robert Jr. becomes a little bit more attainable in terms of maybe just Edwin Arroyo and just one more prospect piece, or just Edwin Arroyo and just a Jake Fraley to be the everyday outfield piece that the White Sox would get in return? I think that is very much something that the White Sox would consider. And I really think that the Reds should consider that as well. Now, I can already see many of you getting prepared to write down in the comment section or hit me up on Blue Sky or Twitter at Reds Reality Pod with your rebuttals of, well, Josh, the problem with Luis Robert is injury prone. And to that, I say, you are correct, sir and madam. However, his ceiling is still incredibly high, and his potential is still incredibly high because of that ceiling. And I mouth water at the possibility of him patrolling center, along with TJ Friedl moving over to right field and Austin Hayes doing what he's doing in left. I just mouth water at that prospect. Now, the Reds should not make this move and will not make this move if the asking price is too high, but they should definitely consider it. But of course, the other rebuttal, as I close out this discussion that many of you are probably saying to me right now, is that you don't want to lose Edwin Arroyo. Apparently, that was a sticking point in the original trade negotiations as well. Well, here's my food for thought about Edwin. Is Edwin going to be an amazing defender? Absolutely. He's one of the most slick guys we've seen in the shortstop position in a long, long time from a defensive standpoint. But the problem is, to make room for Edwin Arroyo on the Reds Major League roster, Ellie De La Cruz has to move to either third or the outfield. And if I'm Reds brass, I don't want to make that move with Ellie until I'm sure that Edwin Arroyo can be an everyday hitter in the major leagues. So, is it worth keeping Edwin Arroyo in the minor leagues and letting him work it out in our system, and then hoping that Ellie De La Cruz is both willing to move and can be just as effective in another position? Or does it make better sense to allow Ellie De La Cruz to continue to get stronger and better at his favorite position of shortstop, keep him there, and get an asset like Luis Robert Jr.? That's what I'm talking about. And I just wanted to leave you with that little nugget. And just think about that today, because today is early release day for MLB The Show 25, which I will be jumping into for the first time as soon as I'm off here. And of course, I will give you my thoughts on the game in a future episode. But that's something I'm going to be trying to do immediately in my Reds franchise, just to see if it's something that's possible. And I felt like giving you all my thoughts on that and just letting you chew on that. Now, we only got 13 days if it's going to happen, and it would come out of nowhere if it did. But just think about it and tell me that that's not a mouth-watering prospect. The Hit King himself, Peter Edward Rose. Edward Rose. Edward? Sorry about that. The Hit King, Peter Edward Rose. Of course, he has really been in the news lately because the reports are saying that MLB might be considering fine lifting his ban and allowing him into the Hall of Fame. My issue with that is simply that there was nothing that Pete wanted more than to be a Hall of Famer. Nothing meant more to Pete Rose than being part of the MLB Hall of Fame. And if I'm the Rose family, I tell Robert Manfred and the Hall of Fame decision makers to stick it where the sun don't shine, because I think it's completely disrespectful and a complete placation of the fact that you could not get this done while Pete was alive, and having him in there now would just be trying to save face and correct a wrong that should have been corrected a long time ago. So, is there anyone more deserving of Pete to be in the Hall of Fame? Absolutely 100% no. But should Pete go in? No, because of those reasons. Now, the discussion can't end here, though, because if Pete is let in, the other thing that is going to happen is that the fundamentals of the game from a Hall of Fame standpoint will forever change. Because if you let Pete Rose in and forgive him for his sin of breaking the gambling rule, which existed back then, and just real quickly before I continue this other thought, I just had one more thing pop back into my head from the disrespectful standpoint. What are the Reds broadcast on now? A network called Fan Dual Sports, who was renamed from Bally Sports. If that doesn't scream hypocrisy from Major League Baseball, who's now accepting of gambling, I don't know what does. Anyway, back on track to what I was transitioning into, and that is if you let Pete in and forgive him for the rule that existed back then, that is still a form of cheating. It's a very mild form of cheating that didn't really affect anyone but Pete. There's not even any proof that him betting on the Reds affected Reds games. He said that he never did anything to influence his bets while he was managing, and there's no proof that he actually did. And that would be something that would be impossible to prove, which is why I say it really affected no one but Pete. However, it's still a form of cheating. And if you're going to forgive and allow one form of cheating into the Hall of Fame, of course, there is the other big form of cheating that was part of baseball for most of the 2000s, and that, of course, is steroid use. If Baseball Hall of Fame becomes exactly what it should have been this entire time, and that is something that is based entirely upon merit and skill and has nothing to do with what goes on off the field, that is a great thing and a wonderful thing and exactly the way things should be. However, that also means that you simply can't ignore the stats of guys like Barry Bonds, Alex Rodriguez, Rafael Palmeiro, Roger Clemens. The list goes on and on and on of guys whose numbers are deserving of being in the Hall of Fame. And I've always been of the belief that steroids assist a player, sure. They help a player, absolutely, but they can't make a guy hit the round baseball bat, the square baseball bat upon the round baseball. And Barry Bonds is the perfect example of the guy was phenomenal before he became out of this world phenomenal with steroids. So you could argue that he was a Hall of Famer even before the steroids happened. So do I think this is going to happen? I think it will if Pete's let in. But I think it's probably a storm that the writers and the decision makers at the Hall of Fame don't want to deal with. So that may be a reason that Pete is not let in, so they continue to not have to allow the steroid users in. I might do a whole episode on that in the future. You let me know down in the comment section below or via at Reds Reality Pod on Twitter and Blue Sky whether or not you think I should do a full-on discussion about that, because as I mentioned, I do kind of see the reasoning behind the fact that you should let the steroid players in, but I also believe that the steroid usage was wrong and did tamper the game in a big way for a really long time. But that is the reality of the situation. If you let in Pete, you have to let in the steroid users. So let me know what you think about Pete. Should Pete get in? Should we open that door? Is it disrespectful? Give me your opinions either through the comments or on social media. As always, let me know everything about what you thought about on today's show, any of our topics. You can check out the video episode that YouTube recommends the most to you. On one side, you can check out my latest episode on the other side, and you can check out the subscription button in the middle if you haven't subscribed to this podcast yet and enjoyed today's episode. And as always, keep it locked right here as I, Josh Razauskas, continue to bring you reality as I see it on all things your Cincinnati Reds.